Let me check out your channel here. Just
Oh,
make sure it's
I'm gonna go public now. Okay, so I
okay.
hit start streaming. There's excellent connection.
And it says go live, right? You got it. You also got to make sure you hit the button that says go live.
Where is that button?
It'll be on the top right
Oh
corner.
yeah. Well, now it says end stream, so I assume that means we're live.
Okay, yeah, don't end the stream then. So yeah, you should be live. Let me look at your channel here. Yep, there it is. You're
Cool.
live.
All right,
Yep, you're definitely live.
we did it.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and unmute my audio here. So let me do a quick intro here, if you don't mind, for my folks here,
Yeah, sure.
and then just let them know.
Oh, he's muting himself. I'll wait before I get into anything. Cause
All right, boys, I want you to review this thumbnail if that's okay.
All right, guys, welcome. I'm actually joined here with Some Ordinary Gamers, Slush TV. We're joined by Dream, Oki. I believe Glink's going to be here in a little bit. And we're going to be starting here in just a little bit. I'm just giving a short intro for the people over on my Twitch channel. So Slush, take it away. Everybody go check out Slush TV on YouTube. Make sure you watch that Dr. K video that I've been linking all day.
yeah, so I wanted to do this like follow up to the video just to because I feel like there's so much to discuss about. Just like that video was meant to open up the conversation about like Twitch therapy, but I feel like there's like a lot of questions and stuff that needs to be discussed. And before I even get into all of that, I also thought that there was some pretty like fair criticisms I was seeing that I wanted to address. Like the main three being that like why did I hyper focus on Recful instead of multiple guests and like make it more broad in general? Was bringing up the reincarnation stuff me blaming Dr. K, and a question that someone asked was isn't it also opening Recful up to harassment when I made my documentary about him, or when anyone does something like that in general? So for like the hyper focusing on Recful thing, I just want to say that from my perspective, like first of all, I'm gonna just flat out admit that like there was some amount of tunnel vision on my part because I did that documentary on Recful and I had this like narrative in my head of like Dr. K is the guy who saved Recful, which like totally shattered obviously later that year. And like so that was part of why I personally ended up hyper focused on him. But I also think that I think that it's not necessarily a bad thing that I focused on just one person, because Recful, yes, he's an extreme case, but that actually because he was more unwell mentally, it actually does a better job of highlighting just how the impact of Dr. K's format, like how it could go wrong. Like maybe it wouldn't be as obvious how it could go wrong with someone who doesn't really have that many issues, but with Recful, of course, he did, and it like highlights that more. And I was gonna say I don't know.
So what do you think is the main criticism that you feel is unjustified? Because you were talking about something that you thought was justified, but what do you feel was unjustified?
Well, I actually think that the is me bringing up reincarnation equivalent to blaming Dr. K. I don't think that's justified. And I think that like I tried really hard to be clear about this in the video, but I think what people seem to be misunderstanding is that they think that because I'm showing Dr. K bringing up reincarnation and then Recful somewhat talking about it in his final stream, that means I'm saying Recful did it because of Dr. K. But I actually say in the video this is not the case. My whole point is, and like I feel like I could really just sum up why this is an important thing to bring up with one question, which is, if you were talking to a suicidal person, would you bring up reincarnation? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it seems like common sense that you wouldn't. And the whole point of me showing that is not that it did cause, I even say that it likely is completely unrelated to Recful's death, but there exists a possibility that they are related. And that, even if the possibility is like a 0.01% chance, it's a possibility that only exists because Dr. K was careless with the way he approached things. And that possibility just shouldn't have existed. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I wanted to like clarify that it's the possibility that I have a problem with, not that I think he caused anyone's death. I just really dislike and I'm uncomfortable with the fact that he would bring up something that seems so irresponsible and create an opportunity, even if it's an unlikely opportunity, that just shouldn't have existed, I guess.
Yeah.
So I kind of wonder one thing, and I'm not sure how you want this format to be. If you want to wait for us to like be called on or something
No.
like that.
Anyone just say what? Yeah.
Okay. Well, one thing I did appreciate in the video is that you were quick to mention that when he does make mistakes, he does own up to them. And I had a feeling there's a few mistakes that he's made, particularly with Wreckful, that he probably just can't own up to them in the way that he would normally, just because of liability reasons and things like that. But you know, playing the advocate here, I do think that he, you know, after I watched your video, because that was actually the first exposure I'd really had to him at all. I went and watched the session with Muda. I went and watched some of the Wreckful stuff, and I was actually very impressed with how it was. But I had the same uneasy feeling that you mentioned that you were having in the video. Now, possibly part of that is due to, you know, that seed was already planted in my head, but I think I honestly would have already had some worries at the end of the day. And I think we also have this sense as a society that experts such as doctors and psychologists and things like that, they're infallible people. So if they're an expert in the field of mental health, they should never fuck up, you know? But that's obviously not true.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I think for me, the most unfair criticism of the video, going back a little bit here, is that people kind of try and take Wreckful and they act like we're unfairly treating the situation because Wreckful was such an extreme case. But I actually think he was kind of the perfect one for this because, you know, Dr. K is doing these online therapy sessions, and you know, a whole bunch of people are going to be totally balanced and fine and nothing's going to come of it. But when you put someone like that, who is that troubled and is that vulnerable, up on that stage, that is where you're going to see problems the most. And
there's also the factor of like, even if he made he did like 100 streams and only one of those streams he fucked up, like that's still not okay.
That's all it meant. That's all it counts.
Yeah.
I mean it, and there was a couple of comments I saw too where, you know, you only focused on Wreckful. Honestly, what other case would you need? I mean, that is the case study to go with. I mean, how many people would need to have that kind of a result?
So he had like 6 sessions with him live on Twitch.
Yeah.
he also had extra ones off Twitch.
Yeah.
See, I feel like in his case, there should have been like, yeah, I think making 1 stream, 2 streams publicly is sensible. But I think at some point when you have that much of a long-term investment with somebody, it's time to send them to an actual expert. You know, I'm sure Dr. K has like plenty of friends who are licensed psychiatrists, people that can take it off camera and keep engaging sessions with them. I feel like at that point you have to go off the internet. At that point, it goes away from this entertainment medium to like, okay, we actually have to help this individual. You know, we have to take care of it. We have to like focus. It's also weird too, because like, you know, of course, before I went onto his show, he told me that like our thing wasn't it wasn't therapy, right? Like I had that disclaimer beforehand, and I honestly I feel like it felt like therapy for me. These are in my case, I was discussing things that I normally would never discuss at all, and by all means, he wasn't like forcing me in anything to say it. Like I just kind of like opened up in my video with him, and I had a positive session. Like he's not like, you know, one of those individuals.
That's a trained skill he has and is getting people to open up about things that they normally wouldn't. And then one thing that Slush brought up in his video is that, you know, he's using clinical psychologist tools like the confrontation and things like that to get people to open up, to get people to be more honest with themselves, to, you know, he's using therapeutic psychological tools that are in his tool belt as a trained psychologist. but he's also playing both sides of the field where he's saying this isn't therapy because he doesn't want to get sued, but for all intents and purposes, it is a therapy session. And one thing I want to ask you, Muda, if that's okay, because you haven't, I don't know if you've actually talked about this since that session. When I watched your entire session last night, actually, it was about 2 hours long. And by the end of it, I kind of got the sense that you were a little uncomfortable by the end. Maybe I was just reading too deeply into it. Like what was kind of going through your head by the end of it?
Oh man, like, so at the end of the session, I was like pretty relieved, but like, I think maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes after it, like anxiety kicked in. I was like, man, I really just did that publicly. Because like, you know, the whole thing settled in. I'm like, man, I really just did it all publicly. And I mean, you know, at the end of the day, I knew that I was doing it, but I was like, man, I felt personally like I had a proper therapy session in the eyes of the public, you know?
Yeah.
That's how I always assumed people felt after going on his show. Because they do divulge like really personal things. In your case, I didn't actually get the chance to watch yours, but I've seen people break down. A lot of.
Oh man, that was really lucky at one point. There was something about that whole thing where it's like I actually really dreaded before I came onto that show because I'm like, man, if this guy gets in my head and I actually break down, that's not a VOD that might. I mean, I'm sure he'd delete it, but at the same time, it's like.
Well,
is that video of your session that's up now, Muda? Is that a video that you are comfortable still having up?
Yeah, that's what I want to ask.
Yeah, I'm comfortable having it up. I feel like the only thing that would really add discomfort to that is like if I sometimes in these situations, like if you got me to like badmouth somebody close to me, you know what I mean? Like I wouldn't want that up there. Or if I mention things like, hey, I'm not like, I don't know, in Recful's case, I wouldn't want any like of my, if I had like a suicidal thought, I wouldn't want that publicly, you know.
Right.
I wouldn't want that ever in the eyes.
I also think there's like a factor of like, if you're like, you know, your session goes up and then later you regret it, you might feel like pressured to leave it up because people will notice that it got taken down and like that looks a certain way, you know?
I can definitely see that for sure.
So just out of curiosity then, you mentioned that after a certain stage, you kind of had this little anxiety moment where you're like, wow, I really just shared that much. So when you were going into that stream, did you consciously expect to actually open up that much, or was it this gradual thing that you're kind of like, okay, well, I'm here, I'm going to do this now?
Well, when we walked in, Dr. K did this thing where we talked like days in advance. I talked to, I think, his one of his team members, and we had a sort of ideas like, what would we talk about? And the initial idea was like, we're going to talk about, you know, COVID and like being isolated from family members, and that's what we discussed. But I feel like my session, I shouldn't say session, but my stream with him kind of derailed to a different like topic in time to time. And it was all of my own, like I consciously said I'm okay with doing it, you know? And it's like, again, like I'd say, he's a really great guy to talk to. Like you can open up to him no matter what.
Well, he seems like, and I'm sure that's a skill that he has. And I think there's something inherent that a good clinical psychologist needs to be a good people person and have those kind of people skills. But at the same time, like I can tell you, like I've always felt like I was personally a good communicator, but that's a skill that can be used for both good and for evil. And what my concern is since this is now a monetization avenue for him, where he brings on people opening up about these personal issues. Since you are not paying for him, one thing we know about using social media is if you are not purchasing, you are the product. And so how comfortable do people feel with that, in that light, that, you know, or how comfortable are you with being the product? And I mean, maybe it's not as crass as the way I'm putting it, but it's certainly something to consider in my mind.
It's a, like, I chose not to mention this in my video because people don't know this. People, like, I see comments saying like, oh, this is such a character attack on Dr. K. Dreamy knows this.
Well, you already had a
I was withholding a lot.
Yeah, like that was one thing I kind of wanted to touch on earlier. It's like there's a lot of questions coming out of this and kind of accusations towards this video that are totally unfounded, and are fully explained in behind the scenes, out of context information that we chose not to put in, either because it was personal, or we're not sure who's comfortable sharing what. And some of it is just things that would have absolutely painted him in an absolutely terrible light and led to wild speculation that wasn't conducive to the message that Slush was trying to send, which is not, hey, we should cancel Dr. K, or is he morally a good person? It's just, this person is doing this thing, and we kind of need to talk about where is the line to draw.
But what I was going to say was that, like, one of the things that I withheld that was, like, a lesser thing, I just decided not to talk about it, was that, like, another way that he's blurring lines is not just, like, therapy and conversation, but also, like, he's a content creator that's collaborating with a content creator, and there's, like, this whole element of financial gain and, like, awareness of audience, you know what I mean? Like, there's this whole other, like, entertainment, financial element. Like, I think it's impossible to say that he's 0% motivated by money, and that's fine to be motivated somewhat by money, like everyone is. But, like, it does raise some questions about, like, how that is interfering with judgment or what's happening on stream. Is he going to push for more juicy details because he knows it's going to...
Well, he's certainly incentivized for it.
That's what I'm saying.
He's certainly incentivized for it, yeah. And it would only be a matter of time. And once you cross one line, it's hard not to cross that line again in the future. So if he did cross the line into, okay, we're just going to talk about tea and we're going to get the juicy details and stuff like that. If he does that once or even just a little bit, it makes it easier to do it the next time, and then the next time, and then the next time.
Right.
I'd say his kind of content, though, I'd be scared of doing it personally.
Oh, I would too, for sure.
God, yeah.
I don't know.
If I made every single video I would make, like if I was him, I'd be vetting every second of whatever I posted, because it's just, I think when you get into the when you get to the section of mental health, which needs to be treated pretty carefully, it's very difficult to, like, I don't know, it's easy to fuck that up, man. And I mean, fucking that up is a lot harder than, you know, I mean, fucking that up is much, it's so easier, much more, how should I say? Yeah. Not easier, but it's like the consequences of fucking that up, the magnitudes are so much more higher than any other type of content, you know?
Yeah. And that, like, one of the things that oh yeah, go for it. Are you outside?
Okay. Yeah, I am. So I'm just going to make a brief comment, at least for now. But what I was going to say, after reading a lot of the comments on your video, and after just kind of knowing the process of you making this, I think a lot of people don't really, their criticisms are coming from a place of saying, like, oh, you chose to highlight these specific things that Dr. K did, or you only focused on these things, and the people you interviewed were biased or whatever. But I think they're missing the point that what you're trying to show is that this case with Reckful is not something to just be glossed over. And it is an important example of, like, maybe that is something that was affected by Dr. K's approach. And so, like, obviously you're going to focus on that because that is the case in question here, you know? Like,
it's very fair.
Yeah, like, people are like, oh, you need more context. I mean, given the length of the video, you gave a lot of context, maybe even more than most people would have. So I thought you were fine on that. And I think people are just, they're not really looking at it, like, from a personal angle, whereas to a lot of people, Reckful was this, you know, very close personal friend or, like, family member. So.
And Glink, honestly, I think something you'd probably agree with is that people sometimes when you speak against something that they are invested in, it's almost like, you know, and this breeds into, you know, like discussions about politics too, where if you say something ill about somebody's, you know, something that they're invested in, it's almost like an attack on their identity, and they feel like they have to protect that person because they're actually protecting themselves.
Totally. I actually was thinking to myself when I was making this video, like, there's got to be a ton of people out there who Dr. K's existence, like, helped them in some way. And then it's like, I'm criticizing the guy who, like, saved their life, so to speak, right? Like, that is not going to feel good, you know?
Sorry, the video itself, when I watched it, didn't feel like a cancellation personally. I mean, in my, like, okay, fine. Yeah, there were plenty of moments where, like, I think Reckful was probably brought up more than any other case, but like we all said, I think the severity of that case, like, pretty much highlights it more than the average person. I think in the case of what your video really conveyed, and I think the message that a lot of people aren't focusing on, is that if you're going to help mental health, right? Think about it like this, right? Like, let's say you're doing like a physical fitness channel, right? And you're giving misinformation. Or, maybe you're doing one-on-one with people when it comes to physical fitness or anything like that, right? And maybe you make a mistake on that. I think the same idea can be applied to like mental health too, right? Like when you're on the internet and you're mixing the entertainment with what a lot of people can misconceive to be assistance, right? Help, like actual help, actual medical attention. I think that's the real problem, right? Like in some cases, having 6 sections with somebody, as helpful as that looks, maybe it's time to really apply maybe it's time to get like more professionals into it. Maybe it's time to like offload that somewhere else. I feel like
that's a really good point you brought up earlier too, and I hadn't even considered that, how many sessions are appropriate.
Yeah. So one of the things that didn't make it into the video, but that we should definitely mention here, is that Dr. K did actively try and get Byron into professional help other than himself. So we don't want people to come away from this thinking that, he was only doing the stuff on stream. There was stuff going on behind the scenes that he was trying to get him into other professional help. He was trying to do sessions off stream, things like that. And it's
also interesting because like I think Dr. K kind of pigeonholes himself a little bit when he's dealing with certain individuals. Because when a case like Wreckful comes up, I mean, you put yourself in issues, right? Like you can't just like offload them that fast, right? Like if you develop at some point when you watch the clips that in your video, you have to imagine that like this person Wreckful becomes kind of dependent on Dr. K. As much as Dr. K would like to tell him like don't be dependent, it's so hard to shake that feeling off once it's already setting in stone. I think in that regard, like I don't know how do you
one of the things that I was thinking was like, well, first of all, like there should be a limit to the number of sessions. That just seems like or at least a number of publicly stream sessions. But one of the things I was thinking about was like there are certain safety measures and protocols that are in place with actual therapy sessions that just aren't in place with Dr. K's format. And it's like maybe these would be more okay if he had those in place. Like maybe because I brought up briefly Dr. Phil in my video just to say like, oh well, he's another example of like therapy entertainment. Something Dr. Phil actually does better than Dr. K is that he has, like, I guess he calls it the ranch. But, like, it sounds stupid, but, like, he sends people to actual professional help, like, right after the show if that's where they need to go, right? And that's huge. I feel like he needs to have that.
So,
this is something that Jim brought up, actually. I think what Dr. K and, like, Dr. Phil and any of these, like, entertainment therapy, like, channels or, like, media groups need is like a red button, like a stop button for like the viewer. Because like I think it's easy to say, listen, if you want to share something, that's fine. If you don't want to share something, that's not fine. But I also feel like there needs to be like some button that he needs to share, maybe over Discord, I don't know, where you just hit it and it just like blanks out the stream, Yep. Because I mean, like there needs to be some level of like finite, like absolute ultimatum, like control to the actual viewer. Because like at that point, I feel like. Because when I was doing my session with him, dude, I was like really opening up and everything, right? And I feel like at some point, no, I mean, like I felt like I had to share, I mean, I felt like I wanted to. I had to. Like the thing is, it's that, dude, even though that we discussed it wasn't therapy, and it isn't, dude, the lines got pretty blurred for me. Like at some point, he was really good, and understand, like I've had therapy before, I've been engaged here and there, like I've dealt, and it's like it's never been as good as a Dr. K session, like.
Yeah,
he was more of a friendlier guy, right? Like, so
and
at that point, I was like, man, I might as well.
That's the thing that Wreckful himself said. I mean, we put it in the video that he has a clip saying that where he basically admits that he sees it as therapy, that he doesn't believe that it's not therapy thing. He has one where he's actually super dejected, which is something that his family confirmed as well. That he reached a stage where when he kind of rebounded, and he says, I thought I'd be cured by now.
Yeah,
and
that
that's
was heartbreaking.
Scary. Like he obviously saw this as real therapy. He obviously thought that this was going to get him to a place that he didn't get to. I think Dr. K definitely did make some extremely unrealistic promises. One of the big ones that I thought about later is that, you know, he mentions that potentially his condition can be cured if he has a stable relationship in his life for over 2 years or something like that. He's like, it's a 50-50 chance. It's like, he was in a stable relationship for 10 years with Jenna or something like that, and it wasn't cured. Why would you give him that false hope at that point? And just kind of tying it back to what we talked about before, that, you know, this is an issue that needs to be changed, and this is something that's got to evolve, is there's a decent amount of at least circumstantial evidence that Dr. K himself also sees it that way, that maybe he made mistakes with Wreckful. And if you kind of look at his sessions with content creators after Wreckful, none of them are on that level or quite as serious as it was with him.
Sort of, but like there are, I feel like 2 examples that come to mind would be, and I granted I haven't watched these like all in full, but Sweet Anita was after Wreckful, and also I feel like the most recent Mitch Jones stream got like pretty intense. Like obviously that's gonna happen because Mitch Jones is grieving, but like, I don't know. It's like he's putting himself in the same sort of risky territory by doing it.
So one thing I wanted to bring up, because that's kind of a segue into something I've got in my notes, because I was talking to you yesterday, Slush. I was like actually taking notes while I was watching this video, and one thing that I wrote down is I just wrote a question: why are therapy sessions private? And there's some obvious answers there. Like obviously people don't want to, they want to feel free to share what they can and not have to worry about saying something embarrassing. But I was thinking about it during Muda's session that I was watching, where he starts talking about some people who may not want him like talking about it. And he definitely, you know, kept things as general as he could. But, you know, if the wrong person watched Muda's therapy session stream or whatever, and he might have accidentally had like a slip up or something, and he actually named a name without even thinking twice or something like that.
My anxiety with that, Jim, like when I talked about my dad in that one, you know,
yeah,
after that,
I didn't want to.
I didn't
want to mention it, but yeah,
I was scared shitless for a while if my dad saw that. Because like you got to understand, because when we were talking, like I don't want my dad to know about anything that I said on that.
Yeah,
so that's about the only anxiety, and the only reason like I'm not worried about it is that my dad doesn't really. He's not gonna find it. Stuff. But that's the one thing that I was really worried about for sure.
Well, I'll tell you what, that was actually the exact one I was thinking of. That, and you know, the other person you were talking about, where, you know, there's a lot of privacy stuff in there, and you know, you know, what do you do when the day eventually comes where somebody says something about somebody else? They talk about abuse or something like that. Like, you know, let's say some Twitch streamer comes on and starts opening up about what her stepdad did to her when she was younger or something like that, you know, like what happens there? You know, at what point do you have to cut it off? And at what point, I mean, these are all reasons why therapy is private, you know?
Yeah.
And I brought up like in the confidentiality section of my video that like obviously, and like I know that this isn't exactly Dr. K's fault, but like you're obviously opening yourself up to targeted harassment potentially, because people are like learning your weak spots, and if they feel so inclined, which like kind of happened to Wreckful, they can just they can hit you with it. And like how do you mitigate that exactly? You know what I mean? If you're going to do a public therapy session. Or
when I saw that part of your video, dude, I freaked out about my thing too, because I was like, man, I literally just like exposed portions of my private life and my head to the world.
Honestly,
I'm like, if somebody harassed me, if I had a harassment community behind me, I'd be fucking.
Well, you kind of do. I mean, I know you have.
Oh yeah,
but I mean, like, but at the same time, like, you know, I hate that like people. You're a big boy, you can take care of yourself, but like it's just as your friend, like I felt mad for you while you were obviously being sincere and all that. At times I really just had this burning sensation in my mind that I felt like you were being manipulated somehow. I mean, I don't want to like go too deeply into that, because I don't want to like insult your own intelligence and your own self-awareness.
No,
it's just that's kind of the impression that I got.
When you say that, I think it's a fair assessment to make. because when I'm in a situation like that, and I think any creator's in a situation like that, you tend to detach yourself a little bit, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're not yourself. Like, I will admit to a degree, when I was speaking to him, there was a point where like my rationale, like, the rational part of me just sort of like died down a little bit.
And that's not a weakness, by the way.
No.
Even the strongest person in the world has weak spots in the armor and all that. I have tons, but we all have vulnerabilities, no matter how strong of a person we are. And I felt like the specific things he really honed in on, instead of focusing on what you actually came to talk to him about, which was the isolation stuff and all that. Because that's what you said you wanted to talk about, and he masterfully weaved you into a discussion about things you said yourself you would never talk about publicly. And I've got this thing that won't go away in my brain about that. So
I mean,
well, there's also one where I think I talked about my relationships too, as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, man, I don't know, like, it's not that it's uncomfortable. I definitely, I think at some point we might have probably tried to elaborate on one specific case, but I wouldn't jump into it at all. I think, like, in retrospect, when I talk about, like, hey, I have people in my life that are terminally ill, I'm like, man, I feel kind of shitty just saying that out loud. I mean, I didn't even respect that person's privacy, right? Like,
right.
But it's like, it's another thing. Like, when you're in that hot seat, it's hard to keep your rationality. Like, right now, if you guys asked me about that, I wouldn't say a thing.
Right.
But then again, you're also not, therapists that are able to
We haven't
weave me in.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, there's also like something to do with, like, when you're actually in person with somebody as well, it's a lot easier to, like, get a sense of that person. Because I mean, like, Muda, you and I think you're the only other person in the chat I've actually met in person and everything. And there's like a really different vibe you have when you're actually in person with somebody, right? So.
Oh yeah, you're also private and away from cameras as well too.
Yeah.
I think.
No, go on.
I was just gonna say that I think that maybe jumping immediately to the conclusion that he's got like bad intentions is a little unfair, when I think the easy answer would just be that, as much as he says they're not therapy sessions, you have to assume that at least part of that is him falling back on just like therapy tools that he's ingrained to using. So
I don't think it's one or the other either, though. I don't think it's necessarily he's got just bad intentions or just good intentions.
Yeah.
Like, he's every bit as complex as all the rest of us. No one is inherently good or inherently. Actually, I do believe people are inherently good. I will die on that hill.
Like all people.
I really do that. I really do believe all
I
people
believe
are inherently good.
That too.
And people do terrible things sometimes and become, bad people. But I think what motivates people is, by and large, more out of empathy and compassion than anything else. And I think Dr. K has found a way to spread compassion and empathy and talk about these very sensitive things. What I do want to bring up that I feel is really important, something I had in my notes here, is that if there's one thing if I could talk to Dr. K myself, if he had, responded, I feel like one thing that he could do a much better job at is just generalizing things. So if you're going to say this is not therapy, you got to pause once in a while. Once somebody shares something, cool the jets for a second, return and talk to the audience. Yeah. Like, do you see what we talked about here? So when you yourself are going through something like this in your own life, these are good best practices to, deal with this sort of thing. Whereas his style is he completely ignores the Twitch chat. He ignores the audience and he hones in as if it is a therapy session. And I feel like if he generalized it more, included the people that are clearly watching this, then I think the lines that are being crossed would be crossed much less often.
He shouldn't be giving very specific advice the way he does, and like specific breakdowns.
Take the stories and give general advice that's meant for everyone, not just the person he's talking to.
Exactly, yeah. And that would go a long way in terms of not blurring the lines, because, like, at that point, it's like I showed this in the video, that at that point it becomes more mental health advocacy as opposed to, like, be using therapeutic tools and techniques, such as giving specific advice. That is something that sort of pushes it into like the, well, isn't this therapy sort of direction, right?
Yeah.
I also think it's worth mentioning that like it seems that like, so like I got, it was really hard for me to get any interviews with psychologists at all, and I know that some people are like, oh, you got biased interviews. Like those are the only interviews I could get, but I did speak to, like, I did spend a day where I called like a bunch of psychiatrists who didn't want to say anything on the record. But the general vibe I got from literally everyone I spoke to, and I've also been getting emails now from people who are like with PhDs and all kinds of things, and they're all like really like, why is this allowed on Twitch? Like they're
and
all
that's
very
what
vehemently
people should
against
listen
it.
to. The people that bring hate on like the video and say, "Oh, you're just a hater," blah blah blah. Listen to the actual experts that are colleagues of his, who are peers of his in the field. This is not okay. Now, that being said, anytime you break new ground, there are always going to be detractors.
Right.
So you got to have to suss it out in your mind whether or not these are legitimate concerns that these experts are bringing up, or people that are conservatively minded that are just, and I don't mean conservative in the political sense, I mean conservatively as in
cautious.
Things have worked
Yeah.
for a long time, and all of the best practices that we have in our industry are peer reviewed. They're studied extensively, and you can't really start implementing new types of psychology practices and just start human trials right away, right? I mean, you have to be able to back it up with science that this is okay, this works, this isn't going to have harmful effects, because we've already seen that it does, or at least with one person in particular, for sure.
Yeah, that's something that I've seen people criticize Slush on a lot for the video is people saying, well, why aren't you leaving this to the trained professionals? You're not a psychiatrist, this, that, the other thing. And it's like all of these people are ignoring that.
That's why I brought it on.
They're ignoring that every single professional that he's spoken to has agreed that there's a problem. And I think you guys touch on an interesting point is like one of his defenses in the this is not therapy thing is this is about educating, this is about AoE healing. It's like, you mentioned that he completely ignores chat in the sessions, and I'm sitting here thinking, well, if your point is to educate, then why would you ignore the chat? I think it would be really easy for him to take these content creators who have extremely relatable problems, talk to them, have them open up a bit about it, and then you literally let the chat, who are obviously going to relate and say, hey, that's like me, you give them the opportunity then to ask you, like, well, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with this problem? And I feel like that's where you're going to get the most education, as opposed to just prying someone for the deepest part of themselves.
But I will say that I do think that, like, what he does is definitely to some degree educating people, right? And, like, it's destigmatizing. Like, there's no denying that he's, like, on the bleeding edge of mental health therapy stuff. Like, no one is doing what he's doing, probably for a reason, but like, he is, like, there does need to be a push in, like, the meta or whatever you want to call it, which, like, he is accomplishing. I just think that, like, he's doing it, like, too boldly or something like that. Like, it needs to be more cautious.
And one thing with Reckful that I think he could have done a much better job at communicating is, what is the purpose of therapy anyway? Because, he, by the comments that I heard in the video from his family members, he thought it was going to be a silver bullet. He was going to be cured and things like that. And as a trained clinical psychologist who is trained to psychoanalyze and pick up on things like that, I really feel like the thing he could have picked up on a little better is that this guy's expecting a cure, which is not what therapy is. It's like mowing the lawn. You don't just mow the lawn once, and once it's done, you don't ever have to do it again. It's an upkeep thing. And there's this really great clip. I think I sent. I don't know if you watched it.
I've seen
the
Rick
and Morty clip where Pickle Rick goes into therapy and all that, and she basically the gist of it is basically, it's work. It requires maintenance and constant vigilance to keep that organ of your body healthy. And it's not one of those things I can just give you a pill and then it's all over.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is, by the way, like, one of my gripes with modern mental health practices. At least in the West, it seems to be very, like, medicinally focused, and like and I'm not saying that, you know, people shouldn't be using medication for like
Clearly,
psychiatric purposes. I think it's good, but I do think that it's like a crutch, and it's part of why mental health is so bad, and that's part of why Dr. K is so great, because he's purely psychoanalytic with his format. And so like I think that's why it resonates so much with everybody who talks to him. And also, like, I just saw someone in the chat really briefly mention that, like, oh, well, clearly the sessions helped him and he was happy. It was only like after when the pandemic hit that things got worse. And yeah, sure, like the sessions did have a positive effect on him, but they weren't an ongoing thing like therapy is supposed to be. They didn't hit they weren't, his issues weren't properly resolved the way they would be with ongoing therapy. I think that, and this is just my opinion, but I genuinely believe that Dr. K is so good at what he does that if he actually was Reckful's therapist, like off stream in a professional, normal way, I think that Reckful would still be here right now. Because I think that like he would have been able to help Reckful get through all the shit that happened like afterwards.
And I think and to your point, I think, you know, because he did the disclaimer, this isn't therapy, but just like us right now talking about it, it's clearly therapy, and that's how we're taking it, and that's how he took it. And so he probably had the same thought, like, okay, I get it, you're saying that because of legal stuff, but you know, I see what's really going on here, you know. And I think Reckful most likely caught on to that.
Yeah, something that I think is a little bit important to bring up, because there's a lot of people out there who are trying to kind of give grief to Slush for their perception that he's been too harsh and too unfair. But there was a moment in his recent suicide awareness stream where he talks about how, while medicine as a whole has advanced incredibly in like the last 20 to 50 years or something like that, mental health is the only area, and you know, psychological medicine and things like that, where we haven't really moved forward, and in some ways we've actually regressed a lot. And especially in the case of Reckful, he mentions himself that he'd been to plenty of therapists, and Dr. K was the only one in all of them that ever made any actual real progress with him. So I think Slush is right that, you know, Dr. K is obviously very, very good at what he does. I don't think anybody here in this call wants to act like he's not a good therapist. It's just,
so what you're saying is he was willing to meet him where Reckful was willing to be met at?
Yeah.
Okay. That's worth bringing up.
Another thing, and I briefly mentioned this in the video, is that I'm saying earlier just now that like you know, Dr. K is able to do like Dreamy said, like Dr. K was able to get through to Reckful, right? And I personally believe Dr. K would have been able to help Reckful if they were continuing doing actual therapy. I actually think that like one of the positives of what Dr. K does is that people who are therapists can learn how to be better by watching what he does, because he's so good at what he does.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I've lost Jim.
No, I'm here.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry, what do you mean you lost me?
Oh, your camera just turned off for me, but it's back.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was trying to switch it so you guys could see me, but I could also like stream. So I got two cameras right now.
Someone in chat just put up a question that I actually think is like really at the core of what this entire video was supposed to be about, is do we think that the stream sessions, if they had just been an unstreamed session where Dr. K had been like, hey, Reckful, come and, you know, let's do this, if it would have been more helpful? And that's a good question.
I think that Reckful would have been less open to it, but that's like a specific case thing, right? Especially considering that like Dr. K had no reputation. But I think that like with Dr. K's reputation now, I bet you a lot of people would be like, they'd be willing to see him as a therapist if they felt like they needed therapy. They'd be like, oh, well, that's the guy I want. But, and also this brings me to another point that I just remembered. I was thinking about this last night, is that what about, there are people who like Dr. K is their first exposure to therapy, and then they don't want to see a therapist because they're like, well, what if they're not as good as Dr. K? What if they're not like Dr. K? And they have this like perception of what therapy is supposed to be like and how it's supposed to go, and then they're not going to be satisfied when that's not met.
I haven't really had that thought, but I mean,
it's a fair criticism. There's
yeah.
One of the things that pretty much everybody that I know that's gotten into therapy, including myself, has been through is that it's not easy to find a good therapist or to
Yeah, it
find
is
the
not.
right fit. You know,
And it's expensive. That's an expensive journey to go on.
No, man. Getting a therapist is, I don't know, it's getting a therapist also has another big problem, and it's just the idea of like, you're paying somebody and you're opening up to them too. You know, it's like,
I wish there was like therapist
not
speed dating.
No, dude, it's not even the expense that anybody's worried about. The problem is it's like opening up in general, you know? Well, yeah, I mean, the expense is one thing, but it's like the idea of just opening up to anybody is a tough thing. And it's like, dude, once you get, I don't know, it's a hard hurdle to get into. Even agreeing to going on healthygamer.gg was already like one of those things where I was like, man, do I really want to? But listen, I like Dr. K. I liked his, I was like, all right, I'm willing to talk. It's just, when we go into the idea of like getting a therapist, getting a shrink to talk to, man, I mean, it's a tough deal to do.
Very hard.
I think I'm with you too. And I mean, this whole stream has kind of started turning into basically kind of like the video did too, where it's really focusing on the negative, but it's important to talk about the negatives because everyone is talking about exclusively the positives. And whether or not you agree with what's been said on this stream, this is an important discussion to have whenever someone's safety is in question. And this is already pretty much by definition dangerous now. Like, it's been shown to be dangerous because things were not communicated, things were not said in a transparent manner, or at least received in the way that Dr. K may have probably intended. You know, when he's told Reckful this isn't therapy, you know, I brought it up earlier where he probably said something along the lines of in his own head, like, okay, I see what's really going on here. It's actually therapy, but you know, we can't just call it therapy. And I just, you know, we got to talk about this stuff. We've got
I kind of had that vibe myself too, Jim. When I first got on there, I was like, because I don't know, I think like maybe an hour into my session, I was like, because that point did hit me up. I was like, man, we did sign a disclaimer, but it's about as close to the real thing as I'm expecting, man. Like,
and I've been in therapy. It's been a little while, and honestly, like, you know, that's why I was saying, you know, like, it's not about the cost. And I was like, yeah, it is, because that's exclusively the reason why I'm personally not in therapy still, is just because I can't afford it, but I need to go.
It's expensive.
But and so and honestly, I've been having a really tough time in the last year. It has been a really, really rough year, but you know, without being gainfully employed, you know, you can't really get the help that you need. But it's just, these are important things. It's important to bring up that you need to be able to talk about this stuff. It doesn't make you a weak person to rely on some, just like it doesn't make you weak to go to the doctor when you break your arm or when you have attention deficit disorder and you need your Adderall refilled or something, you know, and that doesn't make you weak. So why does going to a psychologist make you weak? And why, I mean, it's,
where does the
you are
stigma come
being
from?
vulnerable. You know, I think in this day and age, there's always more that can be communicated, but I feel like in this day and age, we're doing a better job lately of embracing the fact that everyone needs a little maintenance and that it's okay to admit when you're sad or depressed or feeling lonely or things like that. It's still hard, but it's much easier now than it was 15 years ago.
Sure.
And so we've made huge amounts of progress in giving people permission to feel the way they do. All across the board.
Yeah.
That's a fair point.
You know, but even with that in mind, like, I do think we have a long way to go in terms of destigmatizing.
I hope I qualified it enough with that too. So.
There's no denying that Dr. K has helped that tremendously, right? Like, I think that like that the Twitch like gamer audience or whatever, like the niche that he's hit, probably is much more like open to the idea of seeing a therapist than they were before he came onto the scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing's for sure, I think I'm almost positive he's going to end up seeing your video, even though he didn't respond to your request for comment. You know, I think he's going to end up seeing your video. I think he's probably going to end up seeing this live stream. And I'm sure he's going to have a lot to say. And I look forward to hearing what his responses are. Because I don't have a whole lot really against him. I think there are some things that need to be changed. And I am obviously not the professional here. He is. And I don't want, although I have strong opinions, that doesn't mean that I'm always convinced that I'm right.
Right.
So,
yeah, and I just want to quickly say, like, I also, like, I know that there's maybe a lot of people who think that, like, oh, I don't like Dr. K and that's why I did this. Like, that couldn't be further from the truth. Like,
yeah,
I actually,
I mean,
like,
you were singing his praises in a video right before that one.
It's so strange to me to see how many people are coming out and calling this a hit piece, saying he has an agenda against Dr. K. It's like, did you even watch like 2 minutes into the video? He spends the first 10 minutes of the video like gassing up Dr. K, talking about how great he is. And then even as he's going through the problematic elements, I feel like he derails himself every 2 minutes to be like, by the way, just so you know, I still like Dr. K, still think it's good, still don't want him canceled. Please don't take it that way. And it feels like no matter how many times he repeats that, it doesn't matter. People just go, he thinks Dr. K bad. It's so dumb.
Well, remember what we brought up at the very beginning is that a lot of people are seeing it as an assault on their own identity.
Yeah.
And the evidence of that is the fact that the most hateful comments came before the video was even out. I mean, the like-dislike ratio on that video was like 50%.
That's just the internet. Like, people are going to jump to conclusions and make assumptions about what was going to be in the video.
People love to think they know what they're talking about.
People were
myself included.
going at the thumbnail being like, I could tell by the thumbnail that this is going to be a cancel hit piece. And it's like, bro, what are you doing?
It's because it was like a John Swan looking thumbnail.
It was a Staffo thumbnail.
It looked like an internet AJ video to me.
No, don't say
Are we
that.
going there?
I like try to make it look a little bit more customized with like the ethics in the background and like all that.
Well, you didn't make the eyes look like he completely was blasted that whole
should have
day.
centered his eyes more on his skull.
You know, I actually I messaged Staffo when I was like, can you make this thumbnail for me? I was like, please.
Did you really?
I was like, please do not make it look like like I do not want any comments saying this looks like Internet a J videos or a Tro video. And yeah, I got both. I ended up getting both. Well, like, I guess that's just like that's just the Staffo style, right? Like, what are you gonna?
Bro, you could have stretched the face open and it would have said you're copying.
Yeah, just go to Muda for all your thumbnail needs, man. Just Muda will take care of you.
You know how long it takes for me to make that thumbnail? 5 minutes.
Hours.
5 minutes.
See, I thought you actually by hand arranged each pixel, Muda.
No, sometimes the thumbnails like it takes like literally 30 seconds because I'll make an elaborate thumbnail. No, sometimes I'll take an elaborate thumbnail and then I'll look at the 3 auto-generated ones on YouTube and I'm like, you know what? They're better. Fucking
I've started just using like specific shots from After Effects that I like make for my videos as those because like I just can't. I suck at thumbnails so much.
Just thinking back to that big like drama between Twitch and YouTube about which was the harder job, and all the Twitch people who are going to point at this stream and be like, I knew it, it's so easy.
It is. You just have to go to your Premiere and just click that keep aspect ratio and just bam, stretch.
Dude, Muda, you should one of your next videos, if you're ever looking for an easy day, just upload a thumbnail tutorial.
Oh, dude, I can do it like a 30-second one.
Do your first YouTube shorts.
Yeah, there we go.
Short, man.
Okay, I want to make a clarification because I see in chat that there's like a couple people who take issue with the fact that I said, in my opinion, I think that Dr. K would have been able to help Reckful through 2020 if he was doing actual therapy with him the whole throughout the year. Some people are saying that I'm like by saying this, and I think that this is just being super nitpicky here, but they're saying that by stating my opinion, I'm like saying that it's like Dr. K's responsibility to have gotten Reckful through it, or how come he didn't get through it anyway if they were doing off-stream talks.
Nah.
Like that. First of all, I said it's in my opinion. Like, I'm not a fucking professional.
Yeah.
And, like, this is frustrating. You guys are frustrating.
People just need to calm down.
But listen.
Just
Listen.
calm down. Allow someone to have their opinions without having it to be fact.
And Reckful and Dr. K, they had off-stream talks. They didn't have off-stream actual professional therapy sessions. They just did kind of what you saw on stream, but off-stream. And it didn't continue.
And to your own credit,
long.
And to your own credit, he even mentioned numerous times, like, if this was an actual therapy session, this would be a lot different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't he say that to Reckful a lot?
I'm pretty sure he said it a couple times, yeah. And you know, like, no, the off-stream talks that they did have obviously weren't going to be enough. And then, like, obviously, I know that people don't know this. I know this because I spoke to Reckful's family and friends, but Reckful himself grew disillusioned with Dr. K shortly after their stream sessions. He kind of sort of saw him as a one-trick pony or something. Not a charlatan. He just kind of thought he found that, like, when he first started talking to Dr. K, that it was like really mind-opening and like a revelatory experience. But then, like, afterwards, it was like, oh well, this is just kind of the same stuff you've already told me, and I'm not having this mind-blowing experience anymore, so I'm not interested anymore. That was what I was told.
He was looking for the cure.
Yeah, but do you think that is actually just a symptom of the fact that it isn't real therapy? Like, he was doing all of the opening up and pulling him open and getting him to divulge all that, but by not actually having therapy every week, you're not putting that back together. You're not fixing it, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's a really good point, actually, because if you're going to do these things that blur the line between therapy, I feel offboarding the people that you're working with is the most important thing that you can do. You know, it's like, how much of that is actually going on, right? Like, offboarding the actual people you work with. Because here's the thing, dude. If you cover some people and they turn out to have like they have like really big, massive issues, you know, I think it's also your responsibility to make sure that that person is being taken care of by another individual. It's not like it goes beyond entertainment. It actually goes into like, all right, drop what you're doing, take care of that, and go home.
Oki, what do you think, man? Where's Oki been this whole time?
Say, like, how do you even do that when you're doing it remotely the way he does it?
I mean, even assuming you're not doing it remotely, I feel like there's still a big problem there in that we talked about how Dr. K is kind of ahead of the game in a lot of ways. Even assuming he's trying to pick the absolute best person that he knows, like, oh, this person has like a 90% success rate with their clients. If he pushes them off from his sessions into that person, and then let's use Reckful as an example, he sends them to some other psychiatrist and they don't click, I feel like you kind of inadvertently poison the well for them. Like, oh, well, Dr. K was the only one that could do it. And then you're in a bad situation where, like, what is he supposed to do? Does he have to take him on as a client now? Or, you know, at what point does his responsibility end? Like, it's such a difficult subject with so many pitfalls and problems that, you know, it's kind of the core root of everything.
I respect Dr. K. I almost agree. It's just his kind of content. That is a landmine to be. That is like a minefield to be walking through, man.
Yeah.
Like, one fuck up can be so dramatically terrible. Not even about your career, but like about the other person that you were talking to. You know what I mean?
You know, like, I think that, like, I don't know that many other people would have been able to do it as well as he's done it so far. Like, yes, I do think that, like, he's blurring the lines and fucking up, and that needs to stop. But, like, thankfully, for the most part, it seems, I don't know for sure, right? Not in anyone's head, but it seems like he has mostly done more good than harm.
Yeah.
And
that much I'll agree on for sure. Yeah.
And, like, he's just so fucking good at what he does. Like, I can't state that enough. Like,
and when you see him kind of move in for the I don't want to call it the kill shot or whatever, but, like, you know, when he leads you into where he wants you to make this sudden realization, and then when he finally takes the rabbit out of the hat, you know, I mean, it is almost like a magic trick. It's pretty crazy. Like, he's very skillful at doing that.
I mean, Is there anybody in this call that wouldn't be willing to do real therapy with him if they were offered the chance?
I actually signed
I'd
up for the group
100% do
therapy
real
thing.
therapy. Yeah.
I actually signed up for their group therapy thing, but it like put me on this waiting list, like, and it says there's no sessions at all. So I don't know what's going on. So, but I was willing to give it a shot because one thing I wanted as well is one, I do need a little bit of help in mental health area, and then two, this was going to be a good opportunity for me to kind of, I don't want to use the term get in the belly of the beast because like that's not at all like I wanted to be more informed on
Right.
what
And
it's
you know
like.
what? I've heard like I've seen people talking about it because I've been reading like discussion on the video, and there's a few people who've mentioned that they're like in the coaching program that he offers, and that it's been tremendous for them. Like it's been like life changing for them, and I think that's fucking awesome.
That's good. That's what I was trying to get into, but there wasn't like anything available.
What's
well.
possible?
You know, like,
he has COVID
you know what
right
I
now, it's gonna
think,
be related.
I think the real important part is that, like, while we're singing the praises, it's because this is such a sensitive topic that even the slight issue that can be raised is magnified so much more than any other type of content, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, I look at it like this way, man. The kind of content that I make is so low stakes, you know? Like, I'll talk about computers and, like, I think the highest stake that I've ever gotten into in the last 2 weeks is the Chris Chan stuff. And that's because, like, there's so much to cover in that situation. There's legality. It's also, like, disgusting to sort of sit there in front of an edit booth and, like, hear conversations like that over again. But like that's me having an issue with that kind of a topic. He's got to do that on like a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and it can be exhausting. And it goes from a situation where like I'm sure some sessions that he has are relatively lower stakes compared to like your recful sessions, and it's just like he'll conduct himself great in those sessions, but I think because the topic is so sensitive and there is a lot of consequence when you fuck up, that when there are those like slight, foibles we're pointing out in the situation, that needs to be nipped out. It's hard, man. Like, how does he solve it? I don't know.
And plus, it's like, how is he like? There's only so much you could do in terms of vetting. Like, how do you know that someone who's like, yeah, I have mild anxiety, and that's not going to turn into like, oh, like childhood trauma is the source of this mild anxiety? You know what I mean? How can you plan for that? And I don't know.
Well, Muda, did you actually go back and watch your session after you finished?
I did, yeah.
Can you tell us about how you felt?
Oh man, it goes back to the whole thing. Like I was picking out every part of that session where I was like, man, did I say something like that I shouldn't have said? Like if somebody else close to me watches, because that's where my anxiety kept kicking in over and over and over again. Like in that capacity, I was like, man, I kind of wish like I had a private session. I feel like if I had a private session, I'd be even more open than I was in that entire video. That's a thing that I want to say. I think like in some capacity, when you bring somebody on for a show like that and, like 30 minutes in, you're bringing them in to talk about sensitive topics, but also like, I mean, we're fucking creators, at the end of the day, we know a camera's rolling.
Right.
So it's like, well, in some ways I wish the camera was off. I would have discussed way more. I would have not been as general even in that entire session. Or
well, that kind of leads.
If you had been like, hey, can we do this off stream? Do you think he would have obliged?
I feel like he would have.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, that kind of
here's the thing. Like, I think when it comes to his demeanor, the way that he approached me, even with his team members and everything, the nicest group of people that you can talk to. And let me be completely frank. We discussed the topic beforehand. So when I go on the stream with him and it shifts to a different topic, I also let it there. Like, that's my responsibility as well, because there was no point where like he said that, hey, we have to go talk about it. We have to go do it. I feel like I could have pulled the carpet at any moment for sure. In that way, like he's way more professional. Had it been like any other stream, like this is where that part I think I have to commend a lot. Like I feel like if I had asked him like, hey, let's go off stream and I'll tell you a billion things. Hey, let's go off for 5 minutes. I feel like he would have obliged. He wouldn't have, goaded me into keeping the whole situation in front of the public.
So my next question then is like, I think you mentioned that there was stuff that you didn't want someone to hear. Was it your dad?
Yeah.
So let's assume worst case scenario, someone sends this to your dad, he sees it, and he gets mad at you. Like, what's your reaction there? Do you hit a world where you're like, okay, I regret this. Let's axe the video, anything like that, or you're just like, well, that's where the cards lay now, and you kind of tough it out and move on?
I mean, me personally, I'd have to tough it out and move on. I think it's not so much like I'd be worried about my dad getting mad. It's just like I'm not the kind of person that like opens up that much. Like I'm pretty like reserved. Like Jim knows this. I'm very reserved. The only way to get me to open up is like in front of a bottle, pretty much. Other than that, never gonna happen. I'm pretty good at maintaining my emotions, but it's like I feel like if my dad knew about it, it would be like, man, this is an awkward conversation I don't want to have. This is what's going to cause me anxiety for the week. Man, I wish it like I wish it wouldn't have happened. I wish I could go back in time and like prevent me from doing that, so that opportunity wouldn't have arisen. But it's like
I get the sense it would be more just an awkward situation rather than a heated
Wait, are you saying
situation
you wish you didn't do the therapy, the Dr. K stream?
Yeah, I mean, like if it got sent to my dad and we had that awkward conversation, then I wish, hypothetically.
Do you feel like it was helpful though? Like, do you feel like you'd made any kind of progress?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely like put into perspective. Like, I mean, to elaborate, because the whole session's in public anyways, my whole problem is like, I explained it. Like, I'm very focused on work. I'm very focused on like, making something of myself. And that's where I've like stuck my time and energy into. So I think at the end of the day, like I paralleled a lot of my growing up and a lot of my life story with my dad, pretty much like putting my job and career in front of my personal relationships for a brief period of time. Right. And in a lot of ways, yeah, it really put that into perspective for me. Before the Dr. K stream, dude, I didn't even think about any of that at all. After the Dr. K stream, that's what I've been kind of.
I know for a fact you thought about that before.
Oh yeah, I mean, not to that extent. Like, yeah, I thought about it, but like, this is where like after, I think every night I kind of think about.
I think there's a difference between. Yeah, I think there's also a big difference where when somebody brings something to the surface, something that you may even consciously know, but like you kind of, that's uncomfortable and you just kind of put it off to the side and everything like that. So
he really brought up a lot of things where it was like, it's the kind of stuff that the whole reason I bury myself in work is to ignore thinking about the stuff that I told Dr. Fillion. I'm Dr. K. And then now that we had a discussion, I'm like, all right, well, it's out in the open. Now
it's a good thing he didn't give you any strawberry martinis.
Now you're dealing with it head on. This is good, right?
Yeah. I think it's honestly some of the most helpful shit that I've had because it's like, it's definitely unhealthy to like bury yourself in something and not address those core problems. Dude, I could have lived till like 42 and still been thinking about it. Now I can kind of move past it and focus on something else.
Yeah, there's definitely a thing about like aversion causes suffering when there's like the constant sort of like pulling. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to confront it. Like that actually makes it worse over time. Yeah. So that's really cool that like talking to him and him getting you to open up about it actually it was therapeutic for you. Like it's hard not to like appreciate stuff like that, but it's it's like that double-edged sword that people only look at that one side, but it's actually like, well, we have to consider how this could also go wrong.
And there are a lot of ways that the situation can go wrong, 100%. I mean, I feel like it goes back to the beginning. When I watched your video and I saw the whole like Recful things, I watched some of those like Recful VODs later on myself too. I was like, man, I think it's such a landmine to walk and have those public streams with an individual that's going through all of that,
Yep.
Like it's so tough. Like, dude, if I was a psychiatrist, like if I was Harvard trained, like if I was as good as Dr. K, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have streamed like that. Right. I wouldn't do what Dr. K does if I had his talent,
Which is probably another reason why most don't.
Exactly. I was gonna say, I think most professionals in the field feel that way, right? And like, you could give Dr. K some slack and be like, okay, well, that first session, like, he just didn't know what he was getting himself into. But then there was like 5 more. So, like, why not just do those off stream? I don't know. That's just.
I'm really anxious to. I'm really looking forward to hearing what response he will have on.
Well, if he has a response,
the video
right?
you made.
Well,
I think he will. I don't think he
K
can ignore it.
I think Dr. K also realizes that, like, maybe in some, again, it's in the hot seat, right? Like, I felt like I was in the hot seat with him too. He's probably in the hot seat as well too, thinking that what he's doing right now is probably pretty good. I have to imagine in some capacity, he probably has a dilemma after every stream that he does. Like, man, should that VOD go out? Should, like,
right.
I think there's something that I feel like Dr. K should probably do is before he uploads a VOD on YouTube or Twitch or anything, maybe like send the editing team to confer with the actual like person that they stream with, like, hey, Is there anything?
Or maybe
you
just
wanna
not
cut
do
out?
it live, like do pre-recorded streams or something.
Right. Well, I know he does. There is editing of some of the VODs. Like, one thing that I didn't bring up in my video, but I did think was kind of weird, was he did this like drunk AMA stream, which is totally fine. But, considering like the nature
I've done
of,
those.
yeah, but like you have to consider, like, because of like what he does and who he is, like the possibilities that opens him up to. And what ended up happening was that this guy calls in, and he's like suffers from PTSD, and it's supposed to be like a lighthearted stream, but this guy comes in with serious problems, and Dr. K's drunk, like off his ass at this point. That's like near the end of the stream, and Dr. K starts telling him like this weird. He's like, "Oh, if you want like a near-death, life-changing experience, you should just stare at your reflection in the mirror in the moonlight at 3 a.m. without blinking." And he's like, "And no one else in chat do this. This is just for the guy. This is just for the guy." And it's like, I don't know, like, what the fuck is going on? Like, that whole situation like rubbed me the wrong way. He did eventually have that guy back on, but the reason I bring this up is because he uploaded that drunk AMA stream, but he cut that out, right? So it's like someone there knew that, like, oh, this is not a good look. Probably shouldn't put this on the YouTube VOD. And yeah, I chose not to say it because it's like, okay, well, I don't know, like, I felt like if I said it would be a character. People are going to interpret it as a character attack on him, and I didn't want that.
It's also like, where are you going with it,
Exactly, yeah. So I was just like, I'm not going to put this in the video, but, like, yeah, I don't know. There is definitely an editing team. I just don't know if they are, it seems like they don't usually edit the one-on-one conversations he does too much.
Yeah, I guess
it's really scary though what you just told me, like him coming drunk during one of these like live streams.
I mean,
I haven't seen that
for any other content creator. Hey, whatever. But if your whole shtick is you're a clinically trained psychologist and you give advice, you can't really do a drink stream.
I don't show up drunk off my ass.
That's a slippery slope, because then you're basically saying, okay, well, he doesn't get to be a person because he's built his brand this way.
Yeah. I don't think that's a slippery slope at all, honestly. I think slippery slope is where, like, you would say what's next, but that's not what I'm saying. Is it's not a what's next after that. That is a line that I feel like if you are like, demonstrating yourself as a clinical psychologist
like
who gives advice,
given the content and how he portrays himself, that might be a little too unprofessional.
Yeah,
right.
Like, he shouldn't be doing the drunk AMA stream. I see someone in chat wrote that, like, apparently he said he regretted doing it. So, but that's good, right? Like, he's probably not going to do it again. Maybe he had to have that, like,
and that brings it back to
right?
an earlier point where, like, we have this expectation that people like psychologists and doctors are supposed to be infallible, and they're obviously not.
Yeah, of course.
That whole AMA drunk stream would be better if he like didn't do it on like his main brand. If he just had like a separate side channel,
yeah,
right,
fine.
Where he wasn't Dr. K, he was just like Ally.
Yeah.
I guess one of my big lingering questions about all of this is like that I think kind of goes to the intention of it is, if someone goes on Dr. K and they have a session that leaves them in a bad place because they opened up too much, they feel like there's problematic elements, someone's going to see it, whatever the anxiety is, would he be willing to actually take that person on as a private patient, or would he always be like, no, you have to see somebody else?
You mean, because would it be blurring a line? Because if he says this is not therapy,
this is not therapy, but if you specifically open that wound and this person is like, I only want you, I only trust you, we started this, and now I need to finish this to see it through, would he accept that and be like, okay, well, this is part of the territory? Or
like
would
he Goodwill Hunting situation?
Yeah, or would he be like, no,
I feel like if I was in his shoes, I'd be compelled to. And that's
I feel like you have to.
I think
it's
important to recognize that we don't know the actual ethical rules that are in the psychological community about that either, too. So this is just opinion.
Yeah, because he did also say there was Go ahead. No.
I was just gonna say that dives so much into, if there's a world where you can't, like, let's say there's medical laws or whatever where he can't take that person on as a patient, it's like, then that becomes a huge issue. And I think that is the scariest part of it, is like, if you are going to open someone up like that, especially in front of that many people, you have to have like a 100% bulletproof, like this is the plan if things start to go wrong.
So one thing I just saw a comment in my chat that that really kind of made my eyes pop out here. I'm assuming this person is correct here. He says there are ethical rules that he could be sanctioned for, specifically about how you can't, as a clinical psychologist, you can't see someone outside of your licensing state as a client.
That was a big criticism that
I don't know how true that is, but that sounds like something that makes sense.
Yeah, I think when Slush was doing the research,
which also adds another layer to the onion about how this isn't therapy, guys.
Right.
There was a forum that Slush found when he was doing research that was essentially like a forum for medical students and people going into this stuff. And that was like the most common criticism is like, how is this allowed across the lines? And it's pretty much just because nobody's actually looked into it, I think, in the actual, whoever's running the medical licensing board or anything like that.
So I spoke to a bunch of people, right? And one of those people told me that they had reported Dr. K and their colleagues and reported, this is none of the people that I interviewed, but that they had reported Dr. K, and this person's colleagues had also reported Dr. K to the medical board that gave him.
I was wondering if that was gonna be the next step. Like, what I was like, after your video, I was like, this is gonna come to a head.
But no, I don't. They didn't do it in response to my video. They did it way before I spoke to them, right? And they told me that, like, because they were just personally vehemently against it, and they themselves were like in the field, and they were like, yeah, nothing happened. The board didn't say anything. The board didn't do anything. So
they might not have understood the severity of it.
Maybe.
And they might not have really looked into it thoroughly, because because a lot of times when, you don't get disbarred because one person complains to the bar,
Yeah.
You need to see a pattern of complaints and things like that before somebody opens the file and goes, oh, something's up here.
Yeah. And then, it's possible that, like, if video gets traction, that more attention will go, and then the board will do something. I kind of like dread that personally, because I don't know, like, I can't stress enough that I don't want my video to like cause Dr. K to like disappear. And then, but there's also the question of like, if he wasn't a doctor anymore, would that even stop him from doing what he's doing? Like, maybe he doesn't need to be a psychiatrist. He could just be straight, I'm a life coach at that point.
That's a really good question. Is like, let's assume that the board rules against him and he loses his license. Does anything actually change? I mean, he's making so much money at this point, he doesn't need to be a practicing psychiatrist. And I mean, if you take out like the fact that he is like a Harvard trained psychiatrist who's currently practicing, I don't know. Like, does that matter?
I don't know. In an interesting way, if he wasn't a psychiatrist, it would actually open him up to be less liable, right? Because technically, it wouldn't be fair to perceive him as a doctor at that point, or at least it wouldn't be as fair. I don't know.
But I think that's where a lot of his success comes from, right? Like, there's a million life coaches on the planet. You know what I mean? Like, on the internet.
But he has a portfolio now.
Credentials everywhere.
But he has a portfolio now, and that portfolio is all the one-on-one sessions he's done. And he could be like, well, I may not be licensed anymore, but like that doesn't change that I'm able to do that.
If you lose your license, that
does sound bad. Yeah,
that sounds bad.
That's optically very bad.
What does it though? Because I feel like it's such an easy spin. Like, people are like, well, you were a psychiatrist and you lost your license. And you say, yeah, I lost my license because I was on the forefront of things. I'm a pioneer. People will look back and
speak.
It is, but at the same time, like, is he wrong? Nobody who watches Dr. K is going to deny that he's doing good.
Right, but here's the thing. It is political speak, because I mean, who is really going to be like, if you're terminated, it's not going to list the reason as because you were making groundbreaking new content. I mean, come on. Like, I mean,
it happens. History is shown, man. Come on, dude. There's plenty of people that were way ahead of their time that are well respected afterwards.
Listen, I think it's if I want to make the comparison, it's going to be a bit off the mark. It's like a lawyer, right? Like you get barred as a lawyer. Imagine if you get disbarred, right? Like the idea is you'll never wash off the stink that at one point you were a licensed attorney and they took the license away. And now, sure, there are probably YouTube attorneys, right? There are probably YouTube attorneys right now that are really, really good at what they do. And that's why they have a lot of subscribers. If they cross ethical lines with the bar association that they work for,
I don't know if this is the same thing.
It looks bad.
But like one thing that just popped in my mind is the Wolf of Wall Street, and that guy is not allowed to practice business like the way he was anymore because of how unethical he was.
He's not He's not allowed to.
However, what does he do now? He teaches.
He teaches how to do it,
and he makes a killing doing that. So people still look at him as someone who's an authority on the subject or whatever it is, right? So
but in the world of finance, this is an interesting topic too. In the world of finance, all those teachers, a good chunk of them, the line's already blurred. Most of their like clientele or people that are already desperate to make a crap ton of money in the stock market or everything, right? Like, listen, I've been doing stocks for 2 years. At this point, I've been doing it successfully for 2 years. I would never get into the teaching side of it because of the actual implications. There was one clip in your video that I really like resonated with me where he was talking about, I don't want to get sued, right? Like, I don't want to get sued. That's a big reason why, like, I wouldn't do. I already crap myself talking about like basic engineering. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to give any professional advice that could ever be used in a professional setting that could basically screw somebody over. That's another thing. I don't want to do anything on the internet that could land me in hot water. You guys are discussing the fact that he might lose his license if the board takes him. If I went and trained myself in the medical profession, I'd be scared shitless of ever losing my license. There's also that fact you have to worry about too, right? Like having a license as a doctor, as a lawyer, as a trained financial advisor, anything, it's already a scary premise losing that. That at the end of the day, no matter what, that's where most of your legitimacy comes from. And unless you're really good at it, shaking off the stink of losing that legitimacy, it's such an uphill battle.
I actually think it's funny that you bring up finance and stocks in this case, because I feel like this is also playing out on Twitch in that exact scenario where there's a guy called the Stock Guy who streams on Twitch, and he essentially says, this is not stock advice. And he was like blowing up during the GME thing, and he had to tell people like, hey, I do these sessions in the morning where I talk about stocks and stuff that I think are interesting and that I'm going to put money in. I'm not telling you to do that, but if you do that, there's nothing I can do to stop you, And it's like kind of the same line where like, this guy could get in a lot of trouble for doing that.
Let me tell you why. That's such a good point. There was actually a period where like someone told me, it's like, hey, because I wake up in the morning every day to do stock trading. You know what I mean? Like you wake up at the ding of the NASDAQ bell, you work and everything. There's a reason I never streamed or talked about a session. You make one idea. Like if I was just like, hey, Jim, that one stock, this cannabis stock, right? I'm not saying you should buy it, Jim. But
it's looking pretty good.
Hey, look, I just put 50 grand into this cannabis. Yeah. I'm kind of in a way promoting a fucking pump, because if you buy into it and suddenly, I don't know, it's tough.
Market manipulation,
and that also ties into the crypto, phase stuff, right? Where these guys are doing these rug pulls, and it's like,
man, I am at this point. I am so done with that entire. I'm so aggravated witnessing the amount of financial scams that are going on. Actually, I'm a little pissed. I am so pissed that I'm not getting sued. If I'm being honest with you. I am so pissed.
See, when they delivered the cease and desist to CoffeeZilla, he brought up a good point. It's like, bring it, bitch. Let's have discovery.
That's what I said. I'm like, because the idea.
Well, that was you. That's right. That was you.
No, well, this is deviating a little bit, but like when you go to like these financial like individuals that like flex their money around, they'll always target the people that can't afford to defend themselves. They'll never send the CND and the legal paperwork to somebody who's like, all right, whatever. I've got the same kind of money you do. Sure, we'll go to court. I don't care.
Yeah.
International lawsuit, because it's so easy to intimidate and scare somebody. But like, hey, if you're going up against, like, if Ty Lopez went up against like H3 now, you know what I mean, and they ever went to court, come on now, H3 could it wouldn't be the exact same stakes. And the same thing could be said about this whole like crypto nonsense. And it's I think, listen, at the end of the day, to get back on topic, the comparison is with these licensed fields like medicine, like law, like finance. There's a really good reason why people don't make content that blurs the ethical lines around it, you know? Like, it's not so much like they don't want to shoot themselves in the foot too, but there's a lot that can go wrong. Look, even tying this into the mental health angle so much, the reason I make these videos on like crypto stuff, and it's a deviation from my regular content for sure. I don't care so much that, you know, I'm not doing it for the view side of it. I'm doing it mostly because like you know how many times you go onto like these Reddit boards where they're talking about crypto moonshots and like stock boards and it all drops down? Do you know what the next set of like threads are? Suicide. I shit you not. Some of their pinned posts on a lot of those things are like the suicide hotline, because somebody put in $50,000 of their life savings. It all got trashed to nothing, and that's all money they had. You have to understand, for like the people that are running these things, 50,000 isn't anything, right? Like 50 grand is whatever. But like for the people that you're catering this kind of financial stuff to, 50 grand is all they ever have. That's money they scrape together out of everywhere, and they've lost it. Now, of course, if they went to a financial expert, they might have told them, hey, you know, here's how you can turn the 50,000 into like 60,000 in the course of a year. That doesn't sound as beautiful as like 50,000 to the moon.
Right.
But, you know, these people take a gamble, and the next thing they have is like, I guess I have nothing to do. I'm going to drink bleach and call it a day. That's the scary aspect of it, right? And that's why when it comes to these licensed fields, you don't blur that line. Because who knows? Dude, do you think the amount of people that like fell for some of these crypto scams, like, and they always say like thousands of people are holding this bag, 17,000. If that number dips, imagine just if one of those like 7,000 bag holders decided this is my last day. That's blood on you, my friend. I'm telling you right now, that's blood on whoever ran that. And it goes down to like anybody running these small scale like micro crypto currencies to like Bernie Madoff, you know, like fucking goading billionaires into losing their entire worth in the matter of it. Like that's the level we're talking about. And again, the same thing you can say to legal advice too. If you give the wrong legal advice and that fucks somebody up, and now their life is ruined because you gave them illogical advice, yeah, you're just as bad. You know, same thing with accountants. You know, it's the same reason why like only accountants are discussing financial matters with you.
Right. And I think that with mental health, it's possibly like the most like risky, scary sort of territory, because it's like you're directly dealing with people's perceptions of reality, basically. And I also think that like because it's so risky, that's why like you hadn't seen a video like mine until now, because I think people were just like, I was surprised that no one had done this, right?
It's an emotionally charged subject, man. It is.
And people, I think people are afraid to do it. I was gonna
say there was a comment on the trailer video that stuck out. I think I showed it to Slush. It was a person who was like, I am so impressed that you're doing this. Like, I would never touch this with a 10-foot pole. And I feel like that was like the general sentiment with this. Is like, there were plenty of people that had the idea that, hey, maybe this is problematic, but like, how do you go and talk about that with someone that loved and that respected without having people just immediately take it the wrong way?
Right. The most common thing when I told people I was doing this video was like, you're brave. And like literally everyone said that to me. And I was like, okay,
you are definitely brave. You're brave. Listen, you're brave in the sense that, listen, like I told you earlier on, that Chris Chan video, I have another Chris Chan video right now that I've probably worked like 10 hours on. I don't know if you followed up with that story, but it gets way worse. We're talking like CIA worse, like Navy SEALs worse. I'm seeing you nod like,
I didn't know
what it is.
I've been following.
It's so bad. It's so bad that right now, long-term like 4chaners, I have seen bad things in my day. We're tapping out of the threads. We're like, oh, this is too much for me. This is too damning. Like, I'm not so much worried about the monetization on it. Like, that's going to get yellowed. I'm worried if YouTube will strike my channel down 3 times over for covering this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's nutty.
It's scary. It's dangerous. It's not something that you enjoy treading going into. The only reason I kind of really want to do it is because like there's a side to the story that I feel like people need to see, as disgusting as it is. Just like in this situation, look, you're talking about a topic, mental health, that it is a politically charged, emotionally charged subject. It is tough to lay that down, all right? And here's the thing, listen, you can talk about a billion things on the internet that'll probably put you well into that favor with the community, right? Like if you make a video crapping on like pedophiles,
Yeah.
Everyone's going to agree with you, right? Like, I made videos ripping on these people. Easy, like, nobody's going to disagree with you there. If they do, file it to the FBI.
Right? Yeah.
Right? File it to the FBI. But when you're looking at mental health, people jump into the situation and it's like, there's a lot of positivity. Look at you. You're only focusing on the negative. Look, it's uncomfortable, yeah, but you got to talk about the negative too.
Exactly,
That's the only way. That is the only way a field like this, an entertainment medium like this, evolves and gets better, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's actually like one of the things that I don't remember who I was saying this to. I think it was yesterday, but it was like Dr. K has done so much to advance things, but like we don't get to the next part after that until someone like tries to resist against it, right? Like there needs to be that sort of push and pull for things to move in the right direction. Otherwise, like it's too one-sided, and then we never get to the point where like
I think personally there should be more than one Dr. K on the platform. I feel like there should be another. I feel like there should be like a group of creators that are able to correct one another. You know, like it's one thing to have one psychologist make content like this, but if you had 4 psychologists sitting on Twitch who are making similar types of content, the self-correction that they would do amongst each other would be, you know, good. Right?
Yeah, but the thing is that you're gonna be hard pressed to find, because Jim, your microphone's off. There's no sound coming from you. Yeah, like so, like one of the psychologists that I interviewed for my video, like she actually streams on Twitch. She doesn't do what Dr. K does. She does advocacy. She doesn't do one-on-one stuff. And I think that you're gonna have a really hard time finding anyone willing to do what Dr. K does, right? Because like just like you're saying, it's so scary to put yourself in such a risky position. And that's not even mentioning that like how many people are as good at doing what he does as he is, right?
He is definitely a brave pioneer right now.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's also hard to start at the bottom because for Dr. K, if he loses his, like, we talked about worst case scenario, he loses his license. His career is going to be okay at this point. He's a big enough streamer. He's made enough money that it's not going to hurt him. Someone starting tomorrow that also has that fear, their career could be all they have. You know, if they get to 100 viewers and then the hammer comes down, Dr. K loses his license, and so does everybody else who tried, what do they have to fall back on? They're screwed. So how do you break into that at this point when you have no idea how it's going to play out?
I mean, at this point, like you might as well. I feel like these kind of psychologists who want to be in the pioneering forefront of this kind of medium should probably realize that the efforts are better spent, maybe not so much as an entertainment medium on Twitch, but so much turning what they're already doing into an actual usable psychiatric, tool for anybody to jump into. I think part of what is the biggest appeal for Dr. K is how easy it is to get into it, right? Like it's easy for him to hit you up, you collab back, and you jump in.
Yep.
I mean, if you can make it just as easy with any psychiatrist, and I mean that's a far cry, but like if you can do that, that makes what they're doing so much more helpful in the grand scheme, right?
Right.
Like imagine Jim just told us, right? Like I mean, hey, the only reason that psychiatry is like psychiatric help isn't exactly something that he jumps into is because there is a financial hurdle, and I'll say from my end, there's also that stigma hurdle that you're jumping into.
There are barriers to entry, yeah.
There's pretty big barriers to entry. But I mean, if these guys, if a bunch of these psychologists can get together and make the barriers of entry minimal, like the way that Dr. K is doing kind of right now, even though what he does isn't therapy, of course, would make this whole situation a lot better.
Yeah. I mean, anecdotally, it's like I went to several therapists and they were, not very passionate. They were kind of just doing the motions and they made no progress. And then I finally found one that worked for me. And it's like I broke down in front of her within like 5 minutes of the session starting. It was crazy. She was so fantastic. And it's like, how do you convince people to deal with that? Like, hey, you need to try and go deal with your mental health, but also you're rolling the dice every single time. You're probably not going to hit a winner on the first try, and you have to stick with it, and you have to pay for all of it. Like, that's not an easy sell.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just like the flawed system that we have right now. And I wonder if there's like countries that are doing it better. I don't know too much about that, but
I mean, I think countries right now are still trying to discover how they can do things over the internet anyway.
Right. Psychology is such a new field in terms of, I mean, we've always had the medical field, back hundreds of years. It wasn't very good until kind of recently, but actual clinical psychologists with proper training and all that. It's a very recent thing, and it's something we're still trying to learn. And so the standardization is not going to be consistent from country to country. And I mean, just the evidence of that is, how many different versions in the last 20-30 years has there been of the DSM? So it's a work in progress. It's a field that is going to require a lot of work and science to perfect. There's things that we're doing today that clinical psychologists 50 years from now will look back on like bloodletting is looked on by the medical community.
An interesting little thought experiment is like, you think about the fact that Dr. K is a real doctor. He went to medical school. He's a trained doctor. And you think about like, the idea of psychiatry on Twitch. But let's assume that you take the mental health out of it and you just think about, how would you perceive it if Dr. K was just a regular doctor? He was doing these streams, but he was saying, okay, you come on and you tell me your symptoms, and then I will tell you what your diagnosis probably is, and how that would be perceived as opposed to what he's doing now. To me, it's like that. Well, that sounds crazy. That sounds weird. But then when we watch him do this with mental health, we're like, oh yeah, it's totally, yeah, he should do that. He should help people. It's
because you can see this like supposed immediate benefit, right? Like, especially like Breckville was the first big streamer that he had. You could see it he was going through these like difficult things and like coming to realizations, and then like it seemed to really be helping him. And like at the end of the session, he was like, oh, like, how are you feeling now? And like, steady your breathing. And he's like, I feel like I weight off my chest or something like that. And like, it's hard not to be like, wow, that was so amazing. It's like, it's almost like, and I'm not trying to say that like Dr. K didn't help Breckville, but it's kind of like watching a faith healer heal someone and people are like, this is amazing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that Dr. K is a faith healer or some bullshit, like, don't read too much into that. And not the comparison.
Well, if you want to go into semantics, people go in with the faith that he will heal them.
That is true, yes. But he doesn't heal based on faith, right?
I'm just being a semantic asshole. Don't worry about me.
That's the thing that I brought up in my video, right? Like, people have the expectation that like, oh, I'm gonna go on this so that I can feel better. So it'll be like, I mean, obviously there's like the part that I didn't say, which is like content creators are going on there because it's a PR move, but that's like a whole different story. But anyways, Dreamy, you were gonna say something.
Let's take it a step further then. If there was a doctor on Twitch right now that was like, you come on, you tell me your symptoms, I will give you a diagnosis. You go to the doctor and tell them, I think I have this, I want to be tested. And then they come back and you get the results and you're seeing the results. Would you think that was okay? Like, would you think he was doing something that was fine? Like, do you think that's okay on Twitch?
Well, I think it's a little different because, I mean, that would require somebody to sign away their HIPAA rights beforehand.
But like, the idea is like, we have to kind of we have to challenge our ideas of what is okay with this stuff to try and find what the balance is, right? And I think, yeah, you look at other medical issues and you think, okay, well, would this be okay? You're saying, well, we're seeing, immediate results. It's like, okay, well, let's assume that every time he does it, he has a follow-up stream with that person after they've gone and gotten tested and talked to like their family doctor.
And that's
or whatever.
The biggest thing too, is that there isn't a follow-up. Like, it's just that's the big thing, is that there's no follow-up.
Yeah, that's a huge part, right? And that's what I was saying, that he like, and Mudahar was saying also, like, there needs to be some sort of offboarding process where, like Dr. Phil has, like, Dr. K needs to get a ranch. I just saw Nick Diorio.
Yeah, he's saying pretty much what I said earlier. Is the same as like the financial people.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It is. Yeah, it is the same thing, unfortunately. And
I think though, in this case though, medicine is way more wilder and much more of a minefield than just even finances. I know that the example I gave earlier was already kind of wild itself, but like, man, medicine is just, you're at that final like zenith of where like you can fuck up and you can't. Like, if you're not, if you fuck up as a doctor at that level, I don't know.
I mean, it's like, if you look into like neurological science or psychiatry, anything like that, like, they tell you right at the door, like, this is a very poorly understood area of study right now. We are still learning. you know, all of this is very fringe and it's evolving every single day. And to be confident enough to go and put that online and put yourself in that kind of situation is like, that's wild.
Yeah, he's brave, right?
Yeah.
I'm not brave. I just felt strongly about having to talk about it. Dr. K is brave for willing to like play with those lines at all, right? And then like,
Yeah.
this is just like we were coming in here now because someone needs to like, he's doing like the push, someone needs to do the pull, and it's so funny to me. Like, this is an aside, but like, you told me like before Rec will pass away, if you told me like, yeah, you're gonna be the guy that like tells people that like there's something wrong with what Dr. K does, I'd been like, okay, yeah, or like, what are you talking about? Like, Dr. K's great. So like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Holy shit, my mic hasn't worked this whole time. I finally got it working.
Hey, look who's here. We got Oki.
Yeah. But you know, but I've been listening, and yeah, all of you bring up a lot of amazing points. I think yeah, there's a blurred line between the thing that you defined it as like it's pseudo psychiatry, what he's doing, and then you know there's also a lot of issues with the fact that you know he's broadcasting this and people are putting themselves out there, and he's not following anything up, or in Rackful's case it's only like 6 sessions in total, when you know people, they spend like 20 years in therapy with the same therapist their whole life, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that he really needs to tighten up his protocols for what he's doing, and he needs to define it better if he's gonna, you know, proceed with this. But yeah.
Yeah, I really hope that like that does happen, right? Because it's like, you know, I like, it's very possible that like this conversation just like dies like with this stream or whatever. Like, who knows? He may never address it. The video may never really get that much attention ultimately. And
I don't know. Nick Diorio is in chat, so I'm sure he's got something to say.
well, I mean, he made a good. You know what? But it's one of the comparisons that I was always making is like with the saying like, "Oh, it's not therapy." It's kind of like, it's like a doctor performs surgery on you. It's like, "Oh, it's not surgery." Like, you know, I didn't give you surgery. I just happened to cut you open and sew you up and shit.
Well, cool. Well, guys, this has been a riveting discussion. I've certainly got a lot to think about myself. So.
Yep.
Yeah, this is pretty good, I think. We definitely.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak my mind on a few things. And
yeah, it was good talking to all of you guys.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad that all of you guys showed up because I feel like you brought up like there was things that were brought up that like I hadn't thought about, and I don't know. I feel like the conversation went into some pretty good and productive territory. So I'm pretty happy with how things went overall. Like, I know there's probably people in chat who are like, might be unsatisfied or dissatisfied, whatever the word is. Maybe we didn't cover quite enough. Maybe we did. There was like things. I haven't been keeping an eye on chat that much. I've been trying to focus more on the conversation. So like maybe there's stuff that we didn't get to. But you know what? Like, this is just, ideally, this is just the beginning of opening up this discussion, and this is going to be like a very long, sort of longitudinal thing where, you know, over however long of a period of time, maybe a year or two, like this is just sort of going to be an active discussion, and like hopefully we like fine tune this. Now, I don't know how long it's going to go on for, but you know what I mean. This is the beginning. I'm pretty happy with how we've started it so far.
Yeah,
like I'm excited to see where it goes because, like, you know, I'm gonna have to
Slush, do you have a patron?
A Patreon? I do have a Patreon, but like
I'm gonna sign up after this. Okay. You did a really good job with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think if you take your video and this stream together, I don't think there's anybody that could come out of this thinking that that was a hit piece. I think anybody that actually has the good faith to see this all through will see that there is a genuine care for the material, and that nobody wants Dr. K canceled. We all just want what's best for mental health as a whole going forward.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I can't stress this enough. I knew about like most of the stuff I talked about in the video within the week of Rectal passing. So like, a lot of the stuff I talked about was like in my mind, and I thought like, should I do a video about this? And then I thought, no, Dr. K is such a fucking net positive to the world. Like, I don't want to fuck that up. And then it took like until May this year that I was like, and that was after I started speaking with like Jackie and Jenna and stuff and Blue, that I had realized that they were thinking these things too. And I thought, you know what, maybe I should talk about this, because like I'm not the only one who feels like this is an issue that needs to be discussed, and like I kind of wanted to give them a platform to say what they were telling me. Yeah,
dude, the first time like we were hanging out in real life and you told me that you were making this video, my reaction was shock, because like as everybody knows, he's such a beloved figure.
yeah.
But yeah, I think you did like a tremendous job with it, and yeah,
Thank you.
hope it blows up.
I'm going after Tom Scott now.
Oh, dude.
I'm starting a new meta of just going after beloved figures.
Right. Just go after like the people that have never done anything wrong.
Gotta kill your heroes.
It's
Right, yeah.
it's I think the weirdest criticism, man, I had in your video is like people trying to like blame you for pinning like Reckfold's death on Dr. K. Because I never got that vibe out of it. I'm like, yeah, you criticized him, sure, but like when you mentioned like reincarnation, I was like, I think it's important to say that, because yeah, as a psychiatrist, I wouldn't, if I was in his shoes, I wouldn't have mentioned my personal beliefs in reincarnation.
I think
Like,
that
hey, look, I believe that we live in a fucking simulation. You know what I mean? I believe that the Matrix is real. I think that we're all in a fucking computer virtual machine, and then we'll wake up again. I'm not going to tell somebody like that. I'm not going to tell anybody that if they feel like they ever want to take their life. If I hear about that,
right? Exactly.
and I'm just like, if I tell this person like, yeah, hey, we live in a computer simulation, you'll probably get relaunched as a program. No. That'll never be mentioned.
So irresponsible. And like another thing is like the people who are like, why did you bring that up? Like I would like them to put themselves in my shoes and be like, you've seen this happen. Like you've seen him say that. Like would you not bring it up? If you know what I mean? Like how could you not bring up like such an irresponsible action? I don't know.
It's worth talking about either way, and it was an important thing to bring up. It's just we can't have it all be love and rainbows and stuff. It's something that needs a serious look at it, and I think that's exactly what you accomplished.
Appreciate that. Anyways,
I think people are going to have a problem with it, man, or people that you're never going to change their mind in that regard. Like you're always going to have a situation where like if somebody comes in with a preconceived notion to a video, there's never a way to convince them ever. You just can't.
You know what? Like going into when I was making the video, my thought process was like, okay, there's going to be like people who see it one way, people who see it the other way, and then people who understand the nuance. And if I do my job right, the people who see the nuance is going to be bigger than usual, right? And the fact that it seems to be like I've noticed my comments are like 50-50 split between I dislike the fact that you made this video and people who seem to have gotten it. So the fact that it's like 50% seem to get it, in my opinion, is like that's a positive.
Funnily enough, the Healthy Gamer GG subreddit seems to have taken it a lot better than YouTube comments. Like,
I didn't even know that. I should have checked.
Yeah, that's surprising.
YouTube comments are complete shit piles, man.
Oh, yeah.
There's no way to win on them. There's just never any way to win, dude. I have probably had several videos. I don't know. I made one that was about like the California PC gaming law, and I had to stop looking at the comments because it turned into.
That's how most of the big creator friends of mine are. Like Nexpo, he'll upload a video, he'll read the comments for an hour, and then he will never look at them again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I stopped looking at it once I started seeing like some guy compared my point on PC gaming to like George Floyd. I was like, yeah, that's enough, dude. Alt F4, like smoke a bowl, have a shot of whiskey, and go do something else.
Yeah, I'm out.
Like I'm out of here, dude. Nope.
Yeah, maybe
dude, all I had to do is say Donald Trump in a video, like not even anything else. Just
and with that, you guys, it's been real. I'll be talking to you later. You know. All right, guys. Well, I think I am going to log off here.
Yeah, I think this is a good time.
Thank you so much for the thank you so much for this amazing discussion. I had a lot of fun. Seriously, thank you for letting me come on. So
No, thank you all for being here. Seriously.
everybody over on my Twitch chat, make sure you check out Slush TV. I've been talking about it for a while now, but really make sure you watch his video on Dr. K. It's an important discussion to have. Really brought some things to the surface for me that I think are very important, and I think you will find equally as important as well. So thank you guys so much, and thank you guys for letting me come on. I'll talk to you later.
All right,
Later, guys. And thank you, Nick, for the kind words. I see your donation there, so just want to say I appreciate it.
All right,
But,
thanks
I'm
for
gonna
having
end the
me,
stream
Matt.
now.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All right.
See you guys.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Peace out.